Hi, I'm Shari Goodwin, and for over 14 years, I have helped leaders gain clarity and trust, deepen their impact, and achieve their big goals. And one of the places that we start is awareness of self, how we perceive the world, what our beliefs are, what our thoughts are, how we feel about things, the behaviors that we take, the actions that we take, the decisions that we make, and being able to really sift through all of those to make sure that they're in alignment with where you want to go. And that's a big challenge sometimes for folks, and certainly for me on my own journey. And the other piece of this is how we may be perceived as leaders by the outside world, and certainly by anybody who you may be leading moment to moment or interacting with moment to moment. So feedback is really, really important. But as a leader, it can be very difficult to get the kind of feedback, honest feedback, that'll be informative and really help us on our path. And this is kind of interesting, because when you think about top performers in any other industry, for example, in athletics or in music or in drama, many of those folks have teams of coaches, maybe one coach, maybe multiple coaches, who give them feedback moment to moment on best practices, little tweaks they can make to their approach to make them even better. But for us as leaders, it can be very challenging to get that kind of feedback. And as many of you may know, I get feedback all the time from working with the horses, and some folks have been out and worked with me as the horses. But horses are not available to everyone to give feedback on. So what other kinds of ways can we get feedback? And certainly you can solicit feedback on your own, and that's awesome. I've done that many times, and many of my clients have as well. But there are other tools out there as well. And I want to share one with you today, the Leadership Circle 360 profile, which is I found it to be a really great tool that marries very well with all of the other work that I've been doing for years and the other tools in the toolbox. So I'm going to share a few highlights from the Leadership Circle model that you can use right now without even having to take the assessment, and they can help inform your leadership journey. So I have a few high-level slides that I want to share with you, and some points I'd like to share with you as well. So let's go ahead and jump in. So here's a graph of the output from the Leadership Circle Profile 360. And I don't expect you to be able to read all of the text around it. We'll talk about that in a minute. But this is the graphical representation of the output, which is really interesting. And we'll explore how to use this in a minute. But this shows the feedback that folks have received from their evaluators and from themselves. And we'll be able to compare some of that perception around how the leader perceives themselves and how the evaluators perceive themselves, just like we've done many times with the horses in the arena. What is this Leadership Circle Profile 360? Well, it's the unified, they call it the unified leadership model, since it builds in adult development theory, cognitive psychology, competency research, and more. You can see some of the research around the circle there, self-actualization and systems thinking. And it's a statistically validated 360 feedback instrument, which really correlates leadership effectiveness with business performance, which as a former scientist is really, really important to me to see that someone has actually gone through and conducted the types of statistical rigor around a model to make sure that it really holds up. And it does. And it's pretty amazing. I've taken it myself, and it's been interesting to hear the feedback and begin to integrate it into my own behavior. And so far, over 230,000 global leaders have taken it, probably more by now. And that's over 3 million raters. And the great thing is that it's being used by many well-established companies like Honda and Pixar and Boeing and others. It's quite fascinating and really well structured. And at the foundational level of this model, and this is what I love most about it, is it has these two structures of mind. And the way that I interpret this is the model on the left is this problem reacting kind of mind, and it comes from a fear-based way of being in the world. And on the right, you have an outcome creating structure of mind, which comes from a more generative, I would call it confident and trust-based state of mind. And what happens here is on the left, when you're coming from the sphere-based or problem reacting, you see a problem that comes up in your work world as a threat. It's perceived as a threat, which involves this fear-based trigger, which then invites a reaction, and then it usually fixes the issue temporarily. So it's kind of a triage approach, maybe a band-aid fix, and that's great, but it doesn't really solve anything. And you end up kind of being in the same status quo. So the next time something happens, you go through the same loop again. There's another problem that comes up. You're like, I got to fix this. And you have the response to it. And so you're containing your anxiety by doing these quick fixes, but you're not really growing. And it's not a sustainable model for long-term success. It's kind of what we did in the pandemic. Many of us were just trying to cope and deal with whatever we could, how we could at the moment. And versus the model on the right, which is this outcome creating, and it's based on this generative energy of shared vision and purpose and confidence and trust and passion. And what happens is you're seeing the world through this lens of passion and vision and taking action from that place. And you're constantly growing in that state of mind. It's this continual sense of growing and shifting and adapting and taking advantage of opportunities. And it's an identity evolving. So it means you can actually grow as a leader in that space. Versus the model here on the left, it's an identity maintaining, meaning you're doing the best you can in that situation, and you can't really get yourself out of the situation, which can be super stressful. And the thing with this that's really important to remember is the same leader in different situations may show up very differently on the Leadership Circle 360 assessment. So if you have a fabulous leader with who's operating in a fantastic culture, really working on their something that's aligned with their passion and their purpose and their vision and all that, you'll see really high scores on leadership effectiveness, and it'll be amazing. And then you take that same leader and maybe put them in a situation in a business where it's had a lot of turnover, a lot of stress. Maybe it's going through some growth. Maybe there was an acquisition that didn't go quite well. Maybe it's a startup that's having some trouble. That same leader may start resorting to some old behavior patterns based out of fear, and that leader's leadership circle graph would show up totally different. Would have more of these reactive type tendencies showing. So context matters. So we really need to look at this big picture of awareness of self, awareness of other, awareness of the environment in which you're working when you're getting feedback. That's really, really important. So this is what the Leadership Circle 360 output looks like a little closer up. Again, it's not that important that you go around and see all of the different categories here. What's most important to understand is that the top part of the circle are creative competencies, and the bottom part of the circle are reactive tendencies. And then the left part of the circle deals more with relationships at work or in any situation, and then the right deals more with task. So what we're looking for is at a glance, we're looking for how well balanced is this person with respect to their creative and reactive tendencies, their relationship and their task orientation, and what are the evaluators saying about them. And the evaluators are in the shaded green area there. You can see the evaluator aggregate responses, and then the individual, the leader, is actually the little single bars around there. So you see a little gap between the shaded area and the bar in many of these different competencies areas, and that's normal. But it does give you an opportunity to say, hey, what's going on? The person perceives themselves one way, the evaluators are perceiving them another way. Let's see if we can close that gap around there. There's a little bit of a growth opportunity there. So let's look at this a little bit more closely so you can kind of at least get a little sense. Again, this is a pretty broad level. So there's 18 leadership competencies around this top part of the circle, and they're broken out into 5 main categories, which are summarized in the inner part of the circle there. And you'll see that around relating, self-awareness, authenticity, systems awareness, and achieving. And these are these generative competencies, the ones that fuel you with purpose and vision and passion and allow you to have that growth mindset that we talked about in that second frame of mind that I just referenced earlier. And so we're always looking to cultivate more strengths in these areas. And you can see this person has been evaluated by the raters a little stronger on the achieving side than on maybe the relating side. There's some differences there. And there would be some good conversation around there. And the really interesting thing about this is that these 18 competencies are positively correlated to leadership effectiveness and business success. So really, really important as you're developing an organization and growing an organization for the long term. We want to really inspire a lot of creative competencies. And then on the bottom side of the circle here are these reactive tendencies. And these are summarized in 3 areas. There's 11 reactive tendencies and 3 main categories summarized in that inner circle. Called under complying, protecting, and controlling. And these are the kinds of behaviors that you saw in that first state of mind where it's kind of fear-based and there's a little bit of triage. And many of us in the pandemic, we're dealing with that. We probably have a lot of green showing here, even in our self-evaluation as well. We probably do the best that we can. The thing about this is these are coping strategies. They are not bad things necessarily. They may be our go-to strategy under stress. It might be a way to cope, as I mentioned. But there's a high cost to using these strategies long-term, and they are negatively correlated to leadership effectiveness and business success. So we have to be careful. If we're relying on these all the time, chances are you may be sabotaging some of the success of the business or the organization. And depending on the context, we talked about context earlier, they may be really important. They might be gifts in that moment. So for example, under protecting, we have distance and critical and arrogant. Distance can be seen in a really a good light as a gift, where you may decide not to engage in some of the drama that's going on or some kind of an issue, and you're just going to step back and wait a little bit, and that's okay, and let it play out. And then if it doesn't get better over a certain amount of time, you jump in and you deal with it. But that's one way distance could be seen as a positive, as a gift in that situation. But if you get distance in a different context where you're reluctant to really step in and lean into your people when they really need you, or make a decision and you're letting it just fly out there for a long time and you're just not really, you have distance from the decision, that would be not so great. And then around the outside of the circle here, they summarize all of these different attributes, which has been really, really helpful. So you get a chance to look at, okay, what is on the left side, for example, we look at the reactive creative scale, which looks at the top part of the circle versus the bottom part of the circle. How balanced are they? You know, where is this person's natural tendency? Is it naturally held up in the creative competencies or down in the reactive tendencies? And also, where are the evaluators showing, and where is the person self-rating? So how close are they? Do the evaluators assessment agree with the individual's self-assessment? Because wherever there's gaps, that's where we can ask and start a conversation and find out what's really going on there. So that's the reactive creative side. Up at the top is the relationship task balance. And this is looking at the relating and achieving summary attributes up on the top there, relating and achieving. And it's saying, okay, so how in balance is the relationship to task? So are folks more likely to be more people-oriented or more task-oriented, or is it pretty balanced? It's good information. Sometimes we need to exercise that task, just get it done, grind it out, achiever mode. but we don't want to do that at the expense of losing the people, right? And vice versa. We don't want to have so much on the people side that we're afraid to ask people what to do and really get things done. So we're looking for a good balance in there. Then on the right side is the leadership potential utilization. And that's just like a bottom line metric of, well, how am I doing here as a leader overall compared to the normed database of global leaders? And the higher, the better there. And again, we're looking at the summary scores. So you can see the green shading in all these summary scales is the evaluator aggregate percentile, and then the bar is where the self-assessment is. And then finally, on the bottom is this leadership effectiveness scale. You know, how am I doing as a leader? Am I a leader that folks would want to follow? And you can see in this case on the bottom, this person, the evaluators say, you could do a little better. And the person says, hey, I'm kind of a rock star. So there'd be a little bit of growth conversation that we could have there. So that's what I wanted to share with you today, are some of these high-level key points from the leadership circle profile model. And I found it very, very helpful for everyone, ranging from solopreneurs, where you can go out and solicit your own evaluator group and get feedback. It's an online assessment. It's great. Doesn't take that long. And if you work in an organization, certainly you can get all kinds of feedback from your colleagues, your supervisors, and all of those folks. And if you own your own business, oftentimes it's really great to get feedback, because it's hard to get trusted feedback from folks. They may not tell you what they're really thinking. And this feedback is all anonymous unless they're your direct supervisor. If you're direct supervisor, you're out there. So hopefully that's okay, and you guys have a good enough relationship. But anyway, just wanted to share that with you, and also remember about this importance of the underlying energy. So it's either this generative type of fuel that's going to be able to sustain you long term, or you're taking some withdrawals from a fear-based mode of operation. And if that's happening, just know that that's not a long-term solution. So do what you can to make some adjustments for yourself, to give yourself more peace and open the door to long-term success. So thanks so much for listening, and feel free to email me with any questions on this, or if you'd like a complimentary consultation on how the leadership circle may be able to work for you, or any of the other leadership models that I've been working with over the years. And I wish you continued awesome success and joy.